I appreciate you coming and joining on this incredible podcast, and I appreciate you being here, your presence, and thank you for reaching out. And hopefully, we can learn and understand the true story of your partner and what's been going on with him. And so I really appreciate you coming down here and sharing your story. If you want to just kind of explain about yourself first, and then we'll move on to your partner and we'll kind of understand the situation.
Yeah, so I've got a friend, his name is Nazar, and he actually introduced me to Ahmed. And in the most, I guess, unlikely circumstances as well. So Nazar, I met through work. Like, he was a work colleague. He ran a finance company. This has gone back quite some time now. And he found himself in a bit of a situation where he, ended up in jail. He did a bit of time, and he was really the first person that I ever knew that went to jail. And I didn't really grow up in an area where that was prominent, or I wasn't really exposed to that. And so, yeah, when he went in, we kept in touch, he supported him with whatever he needed. And one day he called me and said, there's this guy in here. I don't think he should be in here. He's just this kid, and he really needs help. And, with his parole, like, can you help with writing a letter? And I said, like, of course, like, why wouldn't we? Like, it's just the sort of stuff that we did. Anyway, to cut a long story short, like, Ahmed he was sort of taken aback by that. He'd never really thought that strangers would help out someone else, like another stranger that he didn't know. And so from there, he wrote a letter to me from prison. He was in prison at the time. So when he was 17 years old, he got into a fight just outside the casino, and that resulted in an assault charge. So he was serving time for that assault charge. And but a bit of a backstory, like, again, like, just to go back on his backstory. So he was born and raised in Lebanon, and his mum left his father when he was about 5 years old. So he's the eldest of 4 boys. And she came to Australia and did what she could to try to bring her children, here to be able to join her. And he came in when he was just, about to turn 14. So 13, almost 14 years old when he got to Australia and was reunited with his mum and his other 3 younger brothers. Oh, well, they all travelled together because the 4 brothers, came together. And didn't speak a word of English, had never gone to school while he was in Lebanon. He was raised by his alcoholic father and stepmother. And so it already had a bad start. Like, if you think about it, anything bad that could have happened, like all the disadvantages in life that could have happened, I think he really sort of copped them, like, from day one.
And they play a major role.
Oh, huge, yeah. And so when he came to Australia, he didn't speak a word of English, and going into English school and starting school here was really his first exposure to being, educated or going to school, period. And he was telling me that he learned how to spell his name for the first time when he came here, because that was when he first held a pen. And so there was a bit of a misunderstanding in the family dynamic. And when he was 15, almost 16, so probably about a year and a half after he had been reunited with his mother, she lost custody of him. And then he was in the system. So he was with DHS and in and out of foster care. And, that's from, the northern suburbs. Like, that's where
a very young age as well.
Yeah, like, right in the heart of Broadmeadows, so, which is where they live. And imagine being taken out of your family home and only, after you've been in a country for 18 months and not speaking.
That's all you know as well. That's all you have and all you know.
Yeah, and having very minimal English, and being put into foster care. And he didn't take that well and rebelled, and he was moved around quite a bit from foster care to foster care. Anyway, that was really kind of the beginning of, like, a journey of just violence and drugs and things like that. And so by the time he turned 17, he was alcohol, fueled, drug fueled, party drugs, that kind of thing, and got into a fight one night at the casino. And as I said, that resulted in an assault charge. And
How long did that land him in prison?
3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 years.
Time.
The guy was quite injured. So, and I think the reason that it was 3 years was because they charged him when he was 18. So they charged him as an adult.
Oh.
Yeah, even though the actual assault happened, the fight happened when he was a minor, they charged him as an adult. And yeah, so he ended up doing 3 years. And so, so we started talking while he was serving time towards the end of his sentence. And I think he had about 6 months left on his sentence when my friend Naz had reached out and said, can you help him with this letter? And I helped him with writing this letter, and I really didn't expect to ever hear from him. It was just something that Naz and I did. Like, it was every time, just in our line of work back then, every time that people needed things done or needed help with anything, we would lean on each other if that was something he could do or it was something that I could do, and we just did it, like, without really giving a second thought. But then, it must have touched Ahmad, differently, because he just wasn't used to people outside of who he knew helping him with anything.
Especially a woman.
that as well.
He would have probably least expected that.
Yeah. And someone who didn't know him. So he started writing to me, and I never wrote back because I just thought, okay, that was nice. He wrote a thank you letter. And but then he needed further assistance. And then Naz said to me, I'm going to put you on his phone list if that's okay, so he can call you himself and further explain what help he needs. And so he did that, and we had a few phone conversations, and very just basic, this is what's happening, this is what he needed help with. But then the phone calls just kept coming, like, he just kept calling. And when you get a phone call from prison, you don't actually know who is calling until you've answered the phone. And because Naz used to call me every day as well, because I had a local number, which back then was just a local call rate, whereas if they were to call anyone else from a prison phone on a mobile phone, like, they were being billed, at 30-second blocks.
Yes.
And their phone credit for the month would just be blown in a couple of phone calls. So he would call me every day, and if he needed to, this is Naz, that is, if he needed to send messages out to his loved ones or friends, whatever, like, he would usually just call me and get me to do that. So as a result, we spoke every day for the simple fact that it was just cheaper for him to call me and make those phone calls. So I would always assume that it was him calling, but then it was always Ahmad. So and I found it quite ballsy that he was just calling so much. And and at first I thought, man, this guy must be so bored. Like, like, he must be so bored. Like, he's got nothing but time, and he's calling me. When I tell you he's calling me a dozen times a day, it's not an exaggeration. It was about 12 to 13 times.
He was fascinated.
And then, and at first I found it so bizarre, but prison phone calls were only 12 minutes back then. And I used to think to myself, oh, well, at 12 minutes it's going to cut out, and that'll be the end of that. But then he'd call back, and then the same thing would happen, and he would call back throughout the whole day. And each time I would answer thinking, surely it's Naz this time. It's not Ahmad, but it would be him.
It would be Ahmad, yeah. How were the conversations? Just like talking about his experience or what was happening in jail?
In the beginning, the conversations were mostly him telling me about, like, his past, his upbringing, what led him. For some reason, I feel like he needed my validation to feel that he wasn't the horrible person that he may have been perceived to have been. And so that led to him explaining a lot about his upbringing, his time in Lebanon, having to look after his brothers, coming to Australia, what all of that was like. And by nature, I'm quite inquisitive, and I just ask a lot of questions. And at one point, when we got further into our conversations and we were talking about the things that he did that led him to where he was, what happened in foster care and things like that, he turned around to me and he said, "Are you a cop?" Like,
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause nobody's been asking any questions.
I asked those
Yeah.
questions, and I said, "Why would you think I'm a cop?" Like,
Mm.
and he said, "I don't know, but are you a cop?" And I was like, "No." Like, he said, "Are you a lawyer?" And I said, "No, like I'm not. I'm neither." But he
Yeah.
said, "Okay, you asked so many questions that I thought you'd have to be one of those." And he said, "From where I'm from, people don't ask questions." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Fair enough, but I want to know." So,
So you
yeah.
started to kind of get interested in his story.
Correct.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think at the time he was just calling so much that I got used to it without realizing that I got used to it. And then I was visiting Naz as well. I was visiting him most weekends because it's just something that you do for your friends, you know, when they're in a position where they feel like the world's kind of turned their back on them. Um, there's got to be at least a handful of people
Yeah.
that show up for them. So I was visiting him quite a bit, and one day he said, I think that we should have a visit with Ahmed because you've been helping him a lot with a lot of the parole stuff that he needs. You should probably at least meet face to face. So
And what were you working at this time? Were you in like a government job or?
no, I've never worked for the government.
Yeah.
I would never work for the government.
Were you just like normal? You had like a.
I was working in finance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had some sort of understanding of.
Yeah, so nothing to do with the law, nothing to do with the justice system, but just by the nature of the working in finance and real estate, I just had a logical, I think, hands-on understanding of just contracts, basic,
Yeah.
I would say basic legislation in the sense that if it's written a certain way, you've got to interpret things a certain way
Yeah.
without getting emotional. So I just had that natural approach towards, everything really.
And the natural trait where you like to help people. Because clearly,
Yeah.
going out your way and helping these guys over the phone and navigating is something big. Not many people do.
Yeah, well, it was so second nature to myself and my circle of friends that I've never really thought about it because none of us pointed out to each other. We all sort of do the same thing. So I think it's something that is so second nature to us that we don't think of it as that's not something that people don't do. I think when we come across people who are reluctant to do it, that probably stands out a bit more as to in the sense that why would you be so hostile or so reserved about helping people? It was more the other way around.
There's something
Yeah.
beautiful about helping people.
Yeah.
Something amazing. I feel like it's an invisible feeling. It's like a gift that you get, but you just can't see it. But it just feels good. Whether advising someone or helping them with certain messages, or it's just different. It's amazing.
It definitely feeds the soul. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So at this time, how much time did Ahmed have left in prison before he was coming out?
6 months from
6
the
months.
first time that I had spoken to him.
Yep.
And
how was the visit? How was the visit the first time?
The visit, well, we had it together with Naz and Naz's son and his ex-wife, came to visit the same day. So it was kind of like I don't want to say group visit because they didn't allow us to really have group visits in the sense that, even though there's a visit center and a room, you can't really be sitting, like
Close.
The prisoners can't be sitting on the same table.
Yeah.
But we sat, on tables next to each other. So it was interesting. It was exactly how it was on the phone. Like it felt quite natural. And when I saw him in person, speaking to him felt the same as speaking to him on the phone. And it just seemed like a natural progression from the phone calls to the actual visit. And he got approved for parole. And the day before he was due to be released, the parole board revoked his parole and said no, that they basically just changed their mind. They don't really give you reasons and they don't really have to. They can just say, based on new information, we've revoked it. But whatever that is, you're not really privy to that. And so he ended up saying, you know what, you've really helped me out a lot. Don't worry about trying to help me out with parole. But at this stage, he only had 3 months left. He said, I've only got 3 months left. I'm just going to do my time. And so we continued speaking throughout those 3 months, and I continued to visit him at that point. And it was probably, I would say, a few weeks before his actual release that he received, a big envelope from the immigration department. And he called me that day and he said, I've received, this envelope from the immigration department, and it's regarding my visa. And at that point, I had never, ever considered that he just wasn't an Australian citizen, because he'd been here. No, not at all. He'd been here since he was a kid, and it's just not something you think about when you meet people. You don't think, okay, are they from here? Or, are they citizens, or do they, have a visa somewhere else? Their visa status is just not something you think about.
100%.
Yeah. So, and I said, what do you mean? It's regarding your visa. Aren't you an Australian citizen? And he said, I thought I was. And he thought he was too. And because his whole family were Australian citizens.
Also, but him being young, that's the last thing you're going to be thinking about. You know what I mean?
When you come in when you're 13 and you're told you're going to live with your mum, you just think, well, I'm going to Australia. That's my new home. I don't think, even if you try to explain that to a teenager, they're not going to understand the ramifications of what it even means to be a visa holder.
Yeah.
And so, so he thought he was a citizen. And I said, what does the letter say? And he read the cover letter, which was basically, an outline of what the other 300 pages were about. And it said that they are considering, the department was considering cancelling his visa based on character grounds. And at the time, character grounds was defined as anybody who's been sentenced to a prison term of 2 years or more. Whether you serve that term or not is irrelevant. It was later changed to 12 months, but at the time the threshold was 2 years. Either way, it didn't matter. His sentence was 3 years. And so if you had been sentenced to a prison term of 2 years or more back then, whether you served 2 years or not, you automatically came under character cancellation, for having your visa cancelled. Anyone outside of an Australian citizen. So he was a permanent resident at the time. He came on a child visa, so he had permanent residency, but he didn't have citizenship. And so his permanent residency was being considered for cancellation. And we didn't really take it that seriously, because we knew nobody who had ever faced that situation at the time. And we thought, you've been here since you were 13, you've done your time, you had no incidents in jail, further incidents. Surely it's just routine. That's what we thought.
Do you feel like when they rejected the parole, it had something got to do with immigration, kind of restricting him?
Who knows?
Yeah.
We were never told, so who knows?
That's the thing. They won't give an answer or a response.
Yeah, I mean, we can speculate, but it's possible. But he got rejected for parole 3 months before he was due to finish his sentence, and then he got served these papers about 3 weeks before he was due to be released from prison. And so I said to him, I think you should just send it out to me. I can't really gauge what they're saying. There was over 300 pages, in this document. So he did. He mailed it out to me. He sent it out to me. And when I got it, I just went through it and had a look at everything. And I said to him, are you, it says here that, you're not a citizen, that you just hold a permanent resident visa. And he wasn't actually aware of it. I don't think he even knew what it meant, to be a permanent resident. He just thought, I'm here, I've got the right to remain here permanently. And whether that meant a visa or a citizenship, I don't think he differentiated between the two. And so I said, anyway, it's giving you an opportunity just to refute it and say why you think you should be allowed to stay in the country and why this consideration should be considered in your favour. So I said, we'll just write back and fill it out and give them all the documents that they're asking for. So by the time these papers were due, he had already been released because it was just, like I said, 3 weeks before. And we pretty much started seeing each other as soon as he was, or towards the end of his sentence to when he was released. So we didn't even seek a legal advice at the time because there's a little footer at the end of the letter that says you don't need a lawyer if if you feel competent in filling these forms out yourself. And in all honesty, the forms were just the information they were asking was basically just family stuff like who do you have here, what's your family makeup, what are their statuses, that kind of thing.
Just basic stuff.
Yeah. Yep. And then, what are your ties to Australia? What have you done while you were in the community? So it was just a bunch of data gathering, really, all his certificates, all his apprenticeships and whatever courses he had done prior to prison. And yeah, he's got a massive family in Australia. Like his mum is one of, I think she's 7 or 8 children. They're all
Big
here.
family.
And all their siblings have no less than 4 kids each. One of his mum's brothers has like 11 kids.
Yeah,
like massive.
Yeah.
And they're all Australian citizens. So we never really considered that it was even possible that they would cancel his visa. And so we gathered all the documents, sent it all back, and didn't hear anything for about 9 months. And in those 9 months, he still had his visa because they hadn't cancelled it. So he was still technically had the same rights that we have, and went back to work, was in the community, just like getting back on with life. And one day he got a phone call from the department and said, you've got an interview with the immigration department. And he was working in the city that day, and their head office is in the city as well. And he called me and he said, the department wants to see me. And I said, when? And he said, now. And I said to him, don't you think that's a bit strange?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm going to go in and see them. I said, don't you dare. And he said, no, I'm really curious to know. They said that it's got to do with my citizenship. And I said, no government department ever calls anybody and tells you you've got an interview to come in now. Like it just
out of the blue as well, just random.
Yeah, exactly. And I said that it doesn't happen. I said, if you've got interviews with them, they'll send you a letter. It's 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, whatever it might be. I said, no one rings you from a government department and says, come in today, you've got an interview. But he didn't listen. And he was adamant that, he wanted to know what it was. Curiosity got the better of him, and he went in. And he said, I'm already in the city. I'm just going to go in and see what they want. And I said, don't do it. I said, can you just at least wait? Like, even if we just delay it a couple of days, tell them you can't come in today. I said, at this point, we probably need to seek some sort of legal advice to see why they would be calling you.
100%.
Asking you to come in that same day.
Very strange. Yeah. That would normally never happen.
Never.
They wouldn't just call and say, all right, come in now.
Never. Not like, call you, come in now. Like,
anything got to do with the government.
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah. They would send you letters, give you an appointment date, no matter which department it was. Like, no one's calling you to come in now. And anyway, he didn't listen, so he went in. Not that I think that we could have delayed the, we could have changed the outcome. I think we would have delayed the inevitable, but been more prepared for it. So he went in. They're on like level 7, I think, at the time. And as soon as he got in, they pretty much said, your visa's been cancelled and we're detaining you. So, yeah, on the spot, he was just handcuffed on the spot. And I think it was so surreal for him that in the moment he thought, this has got to be a prank, like detained. And so when he would have resisted and he would have, like that's probably why they cuffed him. I would imagine, knowing him, how he would have reacted to something like that. He would have probably lost his mind and resisted, and they would have had to have restrained him.
Yeah.
And when he composed himself and got himself together, he called me. And at this point, he was in tears. And he said, they cancelled my visa and they're detaining me. And I said, like, detaining you where? Like, for how long? And he said, "I don't know, like, they're just telling me that, they're detaining me and I'm going into a detention center somewhere." And at the time, we didn't even know detention centers existed, but we
Mm,
didn't know that they were right at the time, Maribyrnong, right there, so close to us. And there was detention centers in every state in Australia, which
yeah.
we had no idea existed.
And detention centers are for people for immigration, pretty much, most likely, yeah, immigration or
Yeah.
that have kind of disobeyed certain rules.
No, so a detention center, yeah, it's immigration. The purpose that they say is administrative.
Mhm.
So they say it's for administrative purposes why you'd be detained,
Mhm.
and it's for anyone who doesn't have a visa to
Okay.
be in the community. So it could be anyone from a student who overstayed their visa, someone who came here on holiday and didn't go back and they caught them working on a farm or whatever it might be, or in Ahmed's case, someone who had their visa cancelled. And
He would have been in shock.
yeah, yeah. I think we were all in shock.
How were you feeling at that time, knowing like all of a sudden he's being detained?
Well, I didn't know what to think because I've never heard of it. Like I'd never heard of a detention center, so I thought, is he being detained for questioning and then they'll let him out? Kind of like when you get arrested by the police, they can hold you for a certain amount of time for questioning, and then if they're not going to lay charges, they've got to release you. So I thought it was something along those lines, that type of process. I didn't understand back then how much power the immigration department had, to be able to hold people um, for as long as they wanted, as it has turned out to be, and for no without charge. Because I mean, at the same time, they're not being held because they're being charged for something. They're being held because they don't have a visa.
Mm.
And so I said to him, "Where are they taking you?" And he had no idea. Like he couldn't really articulate himself properly. And I said to him, "You're in Australia. Like no one gets detained in Australia without a charge. Like you've got to be charged. A judge has to sentence you, and then you can, be detained and serve time or whatever." I said, "But you're not being charged with anything. You haven't been in front of a judge. You haven't gone to court. Like, how are you being detained?" And he said, "I don't know. Like, and that's all I know. All I know is I'm being detained." And so we kind of really just had no answers for a while.
How old was he at this point?
How?
Old was he at this point?
I think he would have been 24.
So young. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, he had no information to give me. We got off the phone. He probably called me about, I don't know, 5-6 hours later. By this stage, they had transferred him from the head office to the Maribyrnong Detention Centre.
Mhm.
It's since closed down, but that's where it was at the time. And
I didn't even know one existed there.
it's literally right around the corner from High Point. Literally. Yeah. I didn't know it was there either. And
Look at that.
yeah, and at the time I lived in Sunshine, and I was going to High Point all the time, and I drove past it all the time, but I've never noticed it.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I never knew it was there. And anyway, so he called me once he had got there, and he said to me, "I don't know what this place is, but," he said, "there's heaps of people here. They want me to share a room with 4 other guys. And there's all these people here that, like, there was a lot of boat people there as well, a lot of maritime arrivals. Yeah, the immigrants that had arrived by boat.
Yes.
We would have just seen in the media, they're illegal immigrants, they're country shopping. That's all you would have been fed in the media. But there was a lot of them there as well. And they had apparently been there for years. And unless you were an advocate in the space, you would not have known that
Yeah, you wouldn't
that
exist.
they
Yeah.
were locked up
Yeah.
there. Yeah. And I think he was sedated because he was just resisting. He wasn't taking it well. He was like, "What do you mean you're keeping me here?" Like, just no understanding of what was going on. And so they injected something into him. He doesn't know what it was. It was obviously a sedative of some sort. And and he was, when he woke up from that is when he called me. And I said, "Have they served you with any papers?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, you need to organize to get it sent out to me so I can understand what's going on, where you are, like how long you could be there for, and what we can do from here. And so because it was just in Maribyrnong and it's supposed to be a detention centre for administrative purposes only, technically the way they like to sell it to the public is you're not being treated like a prisoner. So in the beginning, you did have a bit more rights. Like, for example, I could visit every day. I could come there and share a meal with him, bring food in from out here. Like I could stop by and get takeaway, take food in, have a meal there. I didn't have to book the visit, so I
It's
could
not
just
as
show up.
restricted as jail.
Not at the beginning, but it became worse towards the end. Like, you know, but in the beginning it wasn't like that. I think because in the beginning it was mostly a lot of refugees that had come in, as I said, you know, through maritime arrivals that were being housed in these detention centres. And in 2014, which is when he was detained, Scott Morrison, our former Prime Minister, was the immigration minister at the time, and he was the one that cancelled Ahmed's visa. And I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but for whatever reason, in 2014, they decided to do a massive sting of visa cancellations under character grounds. So almost overnight, you saw hundreds, you know, to, you know, almost, you know, over 1,000 people that were being collected off the street, having their visas cancelled and swept into these detention centres all around Australia. So Sydney and Melbourne had, you know, quite a lot of them, Villawood in Sydney. And these people were people who had spent most of their life in Australia. A lot of New Zealanders, because back then New Zealanders, while they could come to Australia, they could never get citizenship. So they could live here permanently but not get citizenship. So if they were suspected of being part of like a bikie gang, whether they had been charged or not, or they had historical charges, like some of these charges predated, you know, 20 years in some cases, and they might have had a clean record for the better part of the last decade or so, but
They'll detain them.
they were cancelling visas from people who had charges back from years and years and years ago. And the detention centres just started filling up with people who had been living here most of their life and suddenly had a connection to the community. Their families, you know, were torn apart, and people were starting to shine a spotlight on detention centres, whereas prior to that, because it was mostly maritime arrivals, the community really didn't know that they existed.
Yeah,
So
100%, especially when you're just getting grabbed and thrown in there. People
yeah,
can start asking questions. Where's this guy gone and what's happening to him?
and not only did people start asking questions, everyone had family here, so the visit centres were being filled every day, and then the family started talking to media. Media started realizing that, you know, there's a whole bunch of people in there now that had mostly grown up in Australia. There was one guy in particular, I'll never forget him. He was, I think, in his 60s, like when he was detained alongside Ahmed. He probably came in maybe about 1 or 2 months after Ahmed had been detained. And he was from New Zealand, and he'd been here since he was a teenager. He had some like marijuana charges from back in the 90s. But after that, like nothing. Like, you know, for over a decade, nothing. Had built a life here, built a business, was married to an Australian citizen, had children that were all like born here, had grandchildren as well. And they pulled him up off the street, and he was deported back to New Zealand, you know. And some people might say, oh well, you know, he did the crime, but at the same time, like he'd spent his entire life here. And just because of a technicality, which was, you know, he wasn't an Australian citizen, even though he was a permanent resident here, they deported him. So
Very strange.
kind of like what Trump's doing now, but Australia's just been doing it for years. Like Australia's been doing it for over 10 years, you know.
Yeah,
And
with America, it's ICE.
Yeah.
ICE government, they're just grabbing and off you go.
yeah, but mostly, you know, a lot of people with historical, you know, charges I know that in the Lao community in the United States as well, there's a lot of people from Laos, which is where I'm from, and they've been there, since the Vietnam War, because they went there as refugees after the Vietnam War, and they might have had, some minor charges from back in the 90s that they would have served time for, but then they've never become American citizens. So they've just stayed on their refugee status or their green card. I think that's what they call it over there. And a lot of them have been swept up and been deported back to Laos after 30 years of living there. And so very similar. Like what they're doing is pretty much what Australia was doing back in 2014.
So it's been doing it hidden away.
Yes.
Compared to ICE, everyone knows who ICE is, but Australia's been doing it for a long time.
In 2014, that's when they really ramped it up. So the laws have always been there. Like they've always been able to cancel visas of people who have committed crimes, but it's just not something that they actively did unless it was really like a really serious crime. Like they have cancelled them in the past, but it was, like I said, small numbers and really only on the serious end. But from 2014, like I said, I don't know what changed in politics behind the scenes, but they just did a massive swoop of everyone. And then they changed the legislation and basically said we're reducing that 2-year threshold to 12 months. So anyone who's been convicted of a crime that attracts a 12 months jail sentence or more will automatically, it was an automatic cancellation after that. Whereas previous to that, you were sent a letter, you were being considered for cancellation, but now it was, they had changed it and it's automatic cancellation. And then you get detained and you fight it from detention. So,
do you think they, with his detainment, obviously they basically just said, come in, we're going to have a chat, and that's being detained. Do you feel that they did that because if people felt that they were going to be detained, they would run? There'd be no ability, there wouldn't be a very strong ability for them to take them.
Yes and no. The yes part is I think they get you to come in because you're in an environment they can control. But the no part would be I don't think anyone knew that detention centres existed, and I don't think people really knew that you could be detained by having a visa cancelled. So
it was pretty quiet. It was on the low key. Yeah, I get what you mean.
It was so unheard of and so new. Like when I say so new, I don't mean like the laws itself were new, but it was just what they were doing was new. So he was part of the first cohort of people that got swept up when, they've decided at some point we're just cancelling the visas of everybody who falls under that umbrella. And like I said, that gentleman that was deported to New Zealand, I doubt that he ever thought that he would get a knock on at the door and, just get cuffed and thrown in detention after living his life here, for the better part of 50 years, 50, 60 years. So,
and how did the process kick off from there for Ahmed? It got worse from there?
Yeah, definitely. So I picked up the documents from the front desk. I was able to just go in and pick them up. He had left them there for me. And I probably spent the rest of that afternoon just reading through everything. There was just hundreds of pages of just documents of what this visa cancellation was, why they cancelled it, and that kind of thing. So in the immigration legislation, there's two types of cancellations. One that's done by the immigration minister himself, where he personally signs off on the cancellation. And the second one is when one of the delegates sign off on a cancellation. So someone who works in the department has made a decision. If one of the delegates cancels your visa, you can appeal that through the tribunal. And then from there, if that doesn't work, you can go from there to the federal court, to the high court and so forth. But if the minister himself cancels your visa, you don't have an avenue of appeal unless you can prove that there was legal error in his decision to cancel the visa. So in Ahmed's case, Scott Morrison himself cancelled the visa and he signed off on it himself. And like I said, he was the immigration minister at the time before he became PM. And so we didn't have an avenue to go through the AAT, the tribunal. And so our only option was to seek legal advice to see if there was any legal error in that decision. All the lawyers that I spoke to at the time, so going back to when I said it was so new to the point that the legal space hadn't caught up with it yet. Like, no one had really come across those cases and they didn't know how to handle it or deal with it. So, so all the lawyers, so there was no precedent, for them to be able to say, this is how we manage that case or deal with that, or this is what we're looking for. And I had a real struggle with Ahmed's family and picking a lawyer and picking, his legal representation. I was really adamant that I wanted to pick the lawyer because I had a specific criteria that I was looking for, which was basically it had to be an immigration lawyer and it had to be someone that was a specialist in that field.
Correct.
His family found someone that came through the community, and they basically said, oh, we want to use this particular person. And I said, who is it? And they couldn't really give me too much information on who this representative was because they weren't as caught up in his case as what I was. I don't think they had the same comprehension and understanding of like his case as what
and how serious it was.
What I did, yeah. And it was basically someone from within their community. So he's Muslim, so they have quite a tight knit community. And with them, what I later found out is, if it's anyone from that community who came as a recommendation, even if it's your cousins, brothers, girlfriends, aunties, uncle, if the recommendation came through their community, they were more inclined to go with that, and that their word was sort of taken at face value.
Yeah.
So this particular person came through their community and was recommended to his family. And I said, okay, I want to vet him. And his mum sort of like, who are you to want to vet him? She kind of took offense to it, thinking that I was almost overstepping her authority, And I said, well, first of all, like, you don't really understand his case. Like, they have got very limited understanding of the system and English just in general, and very emotional, like, which is totally understandable, but every decision that they were making was emotion based.
Yeah.
And so I said, I would like to vet him before we pick who to go with. And she didn't really want to, disclose that, too much information to me, but through Ahmad, I got all the information I needed. And it turns out that this particular person wasn't even an immigration lawyer. He was just an immigration, what do you call them again? The ones that do the visas, just like an officer.
Okay.
Like he was just a migration agent. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow. So it wasn't
So he was a migration agent. So he did like visa applications and stuff, and obviously known in his community because anyone that wants to come here, like, he can do the applications to get you here. But if you are challenging the department, you actually need a lawyer to be able to
that specializes in that field. Yeah.
And so when I found out that he was just a migration agent, I said to his family, I said, he's not a lawyer. Like, and they said, no, but he's good. Everyone's told us he's good. And I said, but he's not a lawyer. We need a lawyer who can actually find judicial error. We need someone who can go through this decision. And the decisions are like 100 pages long.
Yeah.
And, the department's written down all these reasons why they've declined your or cancelled his visa. And you need a lawyer to be able to look through that and say, okay, they've made legal error there while applying that particular reasoning. And a migration agent's not going to be able to do that. And that's what I was saying to his family. And they just weren't having a bar of it. So I had spoken to a few lawyers myself, and there was one that I came across who I felt would represent us better. And his family just weren't having a bar of it. But in the end, they had the final say because they covered the cost of this agent, and we were still in early stages of seeing each other, and I was still very much an outsider.
Yeah.
So they had the final say. They decided to go with this migration agent, but then in the end, he was dealing with me anyway because I think he just needed me to collect a lot of the paperwork and all of that sort of stuff that he needed. And his recommendation to us was, well, because Ahmed came here on a child visa, and that's the visa that got cancelled, and even though he was born and raised in Lebanon, he came on a Syrian passport because his father is Syrian. And so when his father signed papers for him to enter Australia, they did it, through Syria. So he came here on a Syrian passport. So Australia technically looked at him as a Syrian citizen, not Lebanese citizen.
Oh.
So if they were going to deport him, it was going to be back to Syria. And at the time, Syria was in a civil war.
Mm.
And because Australia is a signatory to the Refugee Convention, they've got an international obligation to not send people back to harm. And so this migration agent said we should apply for a protection visa for him because he can't be sent back to Syria. And, that's the path that we kind of went down first. And I said, how long is that going to take? He said, maybe six to 12 months tops. You should be able to get an answer, but we feel that he should, be able to get a protection visa given that his country of return is Syria and we can't send people back to Syria. He should be able to get refugee status for that. And so I said, so what happens for the next 6 to 12 months? And he said he has to wait in detention. That was tough. Like breaking that news to Ahmed, he pretty much broke down. Like that was tough. He said, I've just done 3 years jail. I've been out in the community for a year, putting my life back together. And you're telling me now I'm going to have to sit here and do time again, like another 6 to 12 months. And he obviously didn't take that well. Like, that took days to digest that you're going to be stuck here for 6 to 12 months. And that would have been the best case scenario if that was the case. But in hindsight now that, where we are, it was almost 8 years in detention, what he ended up being locked up for.
From 6 to 12 months
It's 8 years.
to 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years.
That gives me goosebumps, bro.
8 years. No charge, and all this for simply just not having a visa. The government could have, and still can, resolve his visa status at any time, but they dragged it out. So
8 years is a very long time.
Well, when you think about it, he did 3 years for the assault charge, and if you add 8 years on top of that, it's almost triple his actual criminal charge. But the 8 years was, you're being held without charge.
And what makes it, I think, more difficult is you being locked up. So if I did a crime, I know I'm in jail for that crime.
Yeah.
But when you're locked up in a detention center, thinking that's going to be 6 to 12 months, but then he turns 8 years, that time, over time, you think to yourself, why am I still in here? That's even worse.
Yeah.
Because you don't know when you're going to come out and what's happening. And
that's exactly right. And the difference with a jail sentence is you have a release date. So a judge will say you're doing 3 years. So you know that 3 years to the day you're getting released, whether, no matter what, as long as you don't incur any extra time, you're getting released at the end of 3 years. With detention, the way the legislation was written back then, they could hold you indefinitely until such a time came that they thought either we're going to give you a visa or Syria is safe enough for us to deport you back to.
And you're stuck there.
And you're just stuck there. There's no release date. That's what I think where the head miles came from.
8 years. Imagine what he was going through there for 8 years.
It was pretty bad.
For him and
bad.
you.
Yeah.
Because now this person that you're building a connection with and a relationship is away.
Well, by then, it wasn't even like I could walk away at that point, because between the time he got out of jail to the time he was in detention, we were already in a relationship. So we never thought he'd end up in detention. So we had already started building our life in that time. He was in the community for almost a year before they put him in immigration detention. So in that almost 12 months, we were just going about our life every day, building a life and, that kind of thing. So it kind of really just put a halt,
Can you imagine the mental state he was in, just knowing that you're locked up and you don't know when you're going to come out?
Yeah, trust me, it was bad. Yeah. It was bad for him and for other detainees. Like,
Yeah, it makes you think now that he got 8 years. How many others are still in there? Nobody knows.
oh, there's people that have been there for over 10 years, and that are still there today. Most of those are people that arrived, the maritime arrivals that were there before him. Some of them are still there. And that's because our government have said, because you came here on a boat, you're never going to settle in Australia, and they're adamant that they're not going to settle in Australia. But in saying that, like, there's been a lot of new developments in legislation, over the last sort of since 2014. And a lot of that has been because, as I said earlier, now
People are
there
talking
was,
about it.
yeah, people talking about it. There's a lot of light on the whole immigration system, because all of a sudden it went from people from another country being detained there who probably didn't speak much English, didn't know they had any rights, from that to sweeping people up off the street who had community connections, who spoke English, who knew their rights, who demanded legal representation and that kind of thing. So the legal space has changed a lot from when he first went into where we are today.
When did you decide you're like, I'm going to challenge this?
So what happened was, we went with a migration agent. He applied for a protection visa. They said 6 to 12 months you should get an answer. And we got to 2 years of him being locked up and still no answer. So in these 2 years, we're writing to the department sporadically saying, have we got an update on the outcome of that visa application? And nothing, we would hear nothing from them. And at that point, I said to Ahmed, like, we've got to get rid of this migration agent. We need a lawyer. And 2 years into it, I think I had a bit more say in what was happening. His family were losing hope. They were tired from the battle, and they were a bit more comfortable with me taking a bit more reign in that regard. So he agreed that, like, we need an actual lawyer. We weren't getting anywhere with the department. He had been there 2 years now, and we hadn't even heard back from the protection visa application that we thought was only going to take 6 to 12 months. So then I constructed an email one night. By this stage, I had dealt with so many lawyers, and I kind of really had an idea about how to approach them, because in the beginning, back in the earlier stages when we were trying to find a lawyer, everyone would either tell me that they just, the case was too new, there was no precedent, they couldn't help us, or we had to pay, anywhere from sort of $600 to $1,000 for a consultation fee before they would even tell us if they could represent us.
And that adds up very quickly.
Yeah. And so we did that a couple of times, only to realize that once they looked at the paper, they'd call us for our appointment, and then they'd say, yeah, I've been through your papers and there was no legal error that the minister made, so there's no avenue of appeal. Like, you can't appeal because we can't find any legal error. So after I had paid for a couple of those, 2 years later, I said to Ahmed, I'm not paying for anyone to tell me that they can't help us. I said, I'm going to construct an email. I'm going to send it out to every single immigration lawyer that I can find. And if they can give us an answer and say, yes, they can help us, then we'll engage them. And if there's fees,
That's right.
then we'll pay. But I'm not paying for anyone to tell me that they looked at our papers and they can't help us.
Yeah.
So I kind of just figured out by that point that if I give them as much information as I possibly could and just sort of try to preempt any questions that they might have in their mind, hopefully that would be enough for them to make a quick assessment to determine whether or not they would help us. So as I said, I constructed this email. I sent it to Ahmed. I said to him, jump on Google and help me send it out to pretty much anyone that we can find. And I think in between us, we sent it out to about 90 different lawyers.
That's a lot of lawyers.
Yeah. I think we just spammed everyone we could find that was an immigration lawyer. And out of the 90 or so lawyers that we sent it out to, I think about 70% of them said, we won't look at it unless you pay us a consultation fee. So that automatically wiped them out, eliminated them. And then I reckon the other 39, 29% said, there's nothing we can do. There's no legal error. One came back out of all of them. She actually replied back to Ahmad and said, I've looked through your paperwork and I think you might have a case. So he called me and he said, I've got a response back from one of the lawyers, and she said that I might have a case. I said, forward the email to me. So he did. And I just about died when I saw the email, because I said to him, do you realize that this lady is the same lady that I said from the start that we should be using?
Oh.
I said, we spoke to her 2 years ago, but your mum insisted that we go with this migration agent. I said, we've just come full circle, and he said, oh my goodness, yes, I remember her. And I said, I can't believe that we've wasted 2 years only to come full circle back to the same lawyer that I had picked 2 years ago. So I reached out to her and she remembered us. And she gave us our first consultation for free, because I said to her, I've been through the ringer with lawyers and I'm not prepared to engage anyone financially unless I know that you can help us. And you've got to give me a clear strategy on how you think you're going to do that. So she gave us our first consultation for free. And she basically said, this is the decision. And she pointed out where she thought that the minister made legal error. And she said, because he signed off on the cancellation, we can't go to the tribunal. We have to fight it in the federal court. And so...
Did she kind of tell you what error she picked up on? Was it like a main error?
So in the decision, when they cancelled his visa, they basically said, yes, we recognise that Ahmad is someone that Australia owes protection for because he's a Syrian national, but because of his character, like we because he doesn't pass the character test, which was now 12 months, like the 12 months conviction threshold. They said because he doesn't pass the character test, we deem that the threat to the community is higher than his threat of life back in Syria. And so they actually wrote that like in the rejection letter. And our lawyer at the time, she said, if he had understood his obligations and international obligations, he might have made a different decision because he can't be sent back to Syria. And so that was really the technicality that we were going off.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And she engaged a barrister and basically said, this is my line of thinking. Am I correct? And the barrister took a look at it and said, yes, we think that they've got a case. And so we went forward, we engaged with them, and they put together, our case together. And back then, so when you're a refugee, so when Australia has recognised that you're a refugee, which they did with him, when you go to court, you have a pseudonym. So your name is never revealed.
Okay.
So in that case, he was known as DMH16. And so that's how they always referred to him as DMH16. And so we went to court, and the sort of catch-22, with the whole legal system, is that in that scenario, because a court can't reinstate your visa, only the immigration minister can do that. Even if you win, the most that a court can do is order the immigration minister to relook at his decision and apply the law correctly to the decision. So we knew going into it that if we won this case, it didn't mean that he would get released. All it meant was that they would the court would order the minister to remake that decision and apply the law correctly, because if they found that they applied it incorrectly, then they had to rectify that. So we went to court, and waited several months for the decision to come back. And when the decision came back, we won that case. And the judge found it was a federal court judge found that the minister had made an error while applying the decision to Ahmed's case and ordered the minister to remake that decision according to the
How do you feel in
immigration
that
law.
moment?
We felt like we had a victory. Like we thought this is great news. Like surely now they'll make the correct decision and reinstate your visa and you'll come home. So we didn't really think that he'd be there much longer. Like we actually thought that the immigration minister would remake that decision in a timely manner and make the correct decision. And yeah, but we were sadly mistaken. So that was 2 years at that point that he had been locked up when that decision came through. And fast forward another 2 years, we were still waiting for the second decision. So he's been in there all up 4 years now, just waiting for the minister to make a decision. And by then, we were really running thin on funds. We had spent so much money on legal fees. We couldn't continue to keep our lawyer because, every time she writes a letter to the department or every time we pick up a phone to call her, it's a few $100 each time.
How much do you reckon you spent on legal fees at this point?
About 25, 30K. Yeah. And it was ongoing. Like if we stayed with them, like we would have just been forking out more because, like I said, every time we needed to contact the department, we had to, it was just costing. And him being in detention, and he wasn't drawing an income, he really just relied on us, like his family and myself and us to be able to fund this. And we got to a point where we couldn't keep funding it. And so by the end of the 4th year, we still had no decision. We had let go of our lawyer at the time. And I said to Ahmad, I'm just going to have to look for someone else, maybe someone who can do this pro bono because we're getting nowhere with the department.
Pro bono is?
So they don't charge. Yeah, so they're a pro bono lawyer, so yeah, they don't charge for their services.
Okay.
They usually collect it through other means.
Okay.
Yeah. And one night I was up quite late. I was doing a bit of research just on cases that were similar to ours, and it was so hard to find because they just didn't exist. And even the DMH16 case, even though we won that, and that set a precedent for other people to follow to be able to, fight their own cases based on the legal error that our lawyer had found. It became like the pathway to, further groundbreaking, I suppose, legal breaks and stuff like that. So one night I was reading up on a case and I thought that case sounds quite interesting. It's similar. It's got similarities to our case. And so I went on Ausly, which is the site that publishes all court judgments and things like that. And I pulled the case, from the website. And the first thing I did was I was looking for the lawyer that represented them. And when I found the name of the lawyer that represented them, I emailed her, and I only emailed her. Same thing, really detailed, hoping to answer all her questions before she even reaches back to me so that she could make some sort of preliminary decision on whether or not she could even help us. And the next day she emailed me back straight away and said, I think I might be able to help you, and let's schedule a phone call. So we did that, and we had our first consultation on the phone. She's a Sydney lawyer. She wasn't based here in Melbourne. And as I was explaining her case, I said, we won our appeal in the federal court, but it's been 2 years, since that court hearing, and we're still waiting for the immigration minister to remake that decision. And she said, that's taken ages. Like, it should not take 2 years. She said, I think we need to put a rocket in the department, like fire a rocket into the department so they could hurry up.
Yeah.
And then she said, can you send me over the case files for that case? And I said, can I just give you the case number? Then you can just pull it off the website because it's a large document, you know. And she said, yep, that's fine. So I said, yeah, so it's DMH 16 versus Department of Immigration. And she said, wait, did you say DMH 16? And I said, yeah. And she said, that's a Syrian guy. Like the plaintiff was a Syrian guy. And I said, that's the one. And she said, you know that I have that file on my desk permanently because that has been the first case that has set a precedent for all the work that we have done since then. And she said that the file stays on my desk permanently. She goes, I actually know that case inside out. Like,
Oh my God.
yeah.
So she's been onto it for a while.
Yeah. And I said, yes, well, that's us. And she said, I can't believe it. And anyway, so she agreed to represent us, and she was a pro bono lawyer. So her name's Alison Batterson.
Shout out to Alison.
Yeah, from Human Rights for All, and she is a non-for-profit organisation. So all her work is not for profit. Like all her work is pro bono because everyone she represents is someone who's in a detention centre who has no access to funds. And so, yeah, so all the, like the work is funded through, like sometimes you win a case, the government pays for the legal fees.
They're such incredible people.
Yeah, people donate and that kind of thing. And it was honestly a godsend because we couldn't have kept paying. We just weren't in the position to keep funding legal fees.
There's such incredible lawyers that do stuff like this. It's actually beautiful.
Oh, amazing. And she is like such an amazing human being. Like today, like we're actually really good friends. Like,
wow.
Yeah, she comes to Melbourne, she calls us and we catch up. We go to Sydney. Like if we are there, we'll have dinner, we'll catch up. Like we're just more than client relationship now. We're friends. Like she's an amazing human being. And she ended up getting in touch with our barrister who had won our case for us the first time and said, like, I'm putting a case together for Ahmad again. And our barrister was like, what do you mean? Like, he's not in the community. Like, what do you mean he's still locked up? And then Alison explained to him that, we're 4 years in and they still haven't released him. And he said, but that court case was 2 years ago where they had to remake that decision. And she explained to him that they hadn't made that decision yet. And because she's a pro bono lawyer, when she reaches out to barristers because the barrister has to, is the one that stands up and speaks in court. They're the wig that's pretty much the mouthpiece in court. They understand that, like, if they agree to work with her, a lot of the times their work is pro bono too. Yes. So we had fun. We had paid for him the first time round, but because he was so appalled that Ahmad was still in detention, he agreed to work with Alison and represent us from there pro bono. So incredible. We were like so blessed, like so blessed.
Such a blessing.
And he is phenomenal, like a phenomenal barrister. Like, I don't know if you ever used to watch what was it again? What's that legal show called? Not Suits.
Boston Drama.
Boston Legal. Yes.
Boston Legal. Sorry.
Boston Legal. Yeah. And the younger lawyer in Boston Legal.
Yeah.
Legal. I forgot his name. Very well spoken in court, even though it's TV drama. Our barrister Nick is like that.
Shout out to Nick as well.
Yeah,
incredible.
Nick Wood, his name is. Yeah, and amazing barrister. He's done some really high profile cases, like, as well.
Some of these lawyers are just incredible.
Yeah, and I never expected that he would agree to continue representing us pro bono. Like, it was one thing landing Alison, but to have Nick come on board as well. And he was just so appalled that, like, Ahmad was still there and Ahmad was, and he did win that case for us originally alongside our first lawyer. And so he said, no, like, he was happy to continue representing us pro bono. So Alison's first advice to us was, let's just write to the department. But this time, now you've got new legal representation, and we're basically going to say it's been 2 years since the federal court judge ordered you to make that decision again according to law. We've heard nothing, and if we don't hear anything sort of in 30 days, we're going to start legal proceedings to push for a decision. And so she did that. And believe it or not, like, we got a response within that 30-day period. We got an answer back from the department. And when I got that letter, like that decision from the department, again, like, I just about fell off my chair, like, because I couldn't believe that I was reading another rejection letter, which was word for word the same rejection letter as the first time. They didn't change anything. Like, it was literally like a document that had been copy and pasted. And the only difference this time was that instead of the immigration minister, who by this stage was Peter Dutton, the Liberal leader who lost that last election, he was now the immigration minister because Scott Morrison was PM. And so the only difference was he didn't sign off on the rejection letter. One of the delegates did. And when, as I said earlier, if a delegate signs off, you can appeal that through the tribunal. But the downside to appealing that through the tribunal is that a tribunal can only find an error and say, make the decision again according to law. So I said to Ahmed, this is like a load of shit. Like, seriously, if we appeal this in the tribunal, and we will win because it's exactly the same decision and it's exactly the same legal error, they will take the precedent from the federal court because they're higher than the tribunal. I said, if we win, which we will win, all that means is it goes back to the department to remake the decision again according to law. So we could be waiting another 2 years. And I said, fuck this, we're not appealing. And then he said to me, if we don't appeal, like, I'll have nothing in the system. And mind you, the department can only hold you for 4 reasons, like in detention, like at the time. And that was if you're waiting for the outcome of a court case, which we were at that time for those 2 years. If you're waiting to be deported, which means that they have to have already contacted your country of origin and there's actually a deportation plan in place.
But in his case, they couldn't because it was Syria.
Yeah.
It was a war going on.
Yeah. And, or if you've got an application in the system, like for a visa, and you're waiting on the outcome of that. And so we had exercised all those reasons. And with that final decision, now that we had a decision, we were no longer waiting for a decision, from court. We were no longer waiting for a decision on a visa application because we already got that. And we didn't have an appeal in the system. So Ahmed said, if I've got nothing in the system, like, they could deport me. And I said, they could, but they've already hinted to us that they won't. Because even though at an international level he couldn't be sent back to Syria because Australia is a signatory to the Refugee Convention, which says that they won't send people back to harm, at the local level, our local laws say that we can override that if we want to. So the laws were written in a way where the department could say, yeah, okay, we're breaching international law, but our local laws lets us deport him regardless. So there was always that small risk that they could exercise that, right? And that's what Ahmed was afraid of. And I said to him, we're not appealing this. We're not going through the AAT. We're not going to the tribunal. We're not, just to win a case and possibly wait another 2 years for the same decision and then appeal that to the federal court. We've already been to the federal court. And Alison was in America at the time. It was like the new year, like January, around that time. And they were all on break. And she sent me an email from America and said, because she got sent the decision as well. And she said, I think we should put the appeal in because you've only got 15 days to do it. And she wasn't going to be back before those 15 days were up. And she said, I think we should put an appeal in and at least have something in the system until we figure out a plan B. And I replied back to her and I said, there's no plan B. We're not appealing. And I said, if that puts us in a situation where he may possibly be deported to Syria, then so be it. But we're not appealing. We're not playing this game. Like it really felt like a slap in the face at that point. You know, they could have. I mean, Peter Dutton could have signed that again, and we would have been, you know, not have the avenue of appeal. And again, we'd have to go through the federal court to find judicial error. But no, he didn't. He got one of his delegates to sign it, and we all know that they don't have the power to reinstate his visa. So we would have just been going around in circles. Yeah. And she said it's very risky to not have anything in the system, because having something in the system is the only thing that's keeping him in Australia, even though he's in detention and not being deported. And there was just something inside me, like I'm quite spiritual as well, like, and I kind of just go off gut feeling a lot of the times with everything. And I said, there's just something inside me that says we can't appeal this. And I said, I can't explain it. Like, I don't know what the reason is just yet. I just know that we can't appeal this. And she said, okay, like, I mean, she has to take our instructions at the end of the day. Like, she can't appeal it if we don't want to. And she said, think about it carefully. She goes, are you sure? Because now Ahmed's in a vulnerable position where he could be deported if they choose to go down that route. And I said, if we think that we've got something in the system while we think of a plan B, that plan B is never going to be a solid plan B. Like, you can't have a plan B. Like, if you take away all the options, you'll probably find a solution, like the best solution. And so we didn't appeal it. And for the next, I would say 6 to 12 months, every day we were living like, could he be deported today? Could be any day. Like, because now there was nothing holding him in Australia. Like, there was nothing keeping him there. And so it was like really stressful. And at the same time, he was getting moved around from detention center to detention center. And the way that ABF do that is they kind of just come in the middle of the night when they suspect you're asleep or your guard's down, and they grab you out of your room. You get thrown in a holding room, and you get zip tied with a bunch of other people. You don't know where you're going and until you get there. So the first time that happened to Ahmad would have been probably about 8 months into his detention. And he was being held here in Maribyrnong, and that's exactly what happened. I was due to visit him the next day, and I got a phone call from the department the next day saying that the visit had been cancelled, but they wouldn't give me any reason as to why. And I couldn't get a hold of him. They were allowed mobile phones. That was the other thing that they were allowed, but they just weren't allowed camera phones or smartphones. Not at that time anyway. And so because they weren't a jail, so to speak, you know, they said, okay, we'll give them mobile phones. So his phone was switched off and I couldn't get a hold of him. So I rang the centre phone, which is in the compound where the detainees are. And one of the detainees had told me that they had taken him in the middle of the night. And I said, where did they take him? They said, we don't know. Like, we're really sorry. Like, but they came and grabbed him in the middle of the night. And for the next 36 hours, I think the worst fears were, what if they took him to Syria? What if he was being deported?
Yeah.
Because the department wouldn't give us any information at all. And after about 36 hours, when he had landed at his destination and been processed, he called me, and he was in Perth. He was in a detention centre in Perth. And
oh my God.
Yeah. And so he was there for maybe 5 or 6 months before they grabbed him again in the middle of the night and shipped him off to Christmas Island. And then he was on Christmas Island for a couple of years. So he's being moved around all over Australia. And at this point, we haven't been able to visit him because he was so far away, especially once he went to Christmas Island. There was a period where I didn't even see him for over 2 years. But, and so that was hard. And in these 2 years, we're just going through these legal battles, And so anyway, so we decided we weren't appealing that case. And I told Alison we're not appealing. She was very worried for us. But Ahmad was shit scared because he thought, what if they fucking deport me back to Syria, And I said, you're just going to have to trust me. I can't explain it. You're just going to have to trust me. Like,
sometimes them gut feelings are just worth believing in.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think just through my own line of work in the past and as well, like I had developed this mentality where if you've got too many options, you will always seek out the easiest option. But if you take away all the options, you will find the answer. Like if that's
right.
what you seek, you will find the answer. So that's why I said we're not appealing. We're not going to appeal and have a safety net of just in case. You know, not having anything in the system is going to force us and our legal team to come up with something quickly, a strategy quickly, and something that would work, something that we might not have thought of otherwise if we had a safety net.
Yeah.
And so she came back to Australia, Alison, that was, and got to work with Nick. And they, between them, said, this is really risky. It's never been done, ever. But this is what we think, going forward. And they basically said, since Ahmad no longer has a reason to be held in detention, because no court case, no appeal, no application, no deportation plan, they said, we should try to sue the government for his wrongful detention, saying that his detention has no purpose because he doesn't meet any of the 4 purposes that they are allowed to hold him for. And
is this coming towards the end of his sentence?
No, this is 4 years in. He's still got another 4 years to go.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, and then they said, we think we might, go for a writ of habeas corpus, which basically means that they're detaining you without purpose, without reason. So you have to let him go, pretty much. And they were very, very, very cautious with every step of the way because, one, it had never been done. They were piloting something that no one knew would even work. And if it worked, then great. But we had to take so many risks along the way to make sure that we closed every loophole. And one of those risks included Alison writing a letter to the department saying that because they've exhausted all avenues, they need to deport him to Syria. And before this, we engaged in a long conversation saying, if they call our bluff, they will deport him. But we're banking on the fact that they hopefully don't call our bluff, because and will adhere to international law, but there's that possibility. So obviously they've got to run every risk by you. And she said, but we need to be able to show the court that we've tried everything, and we need them to indirectly or directly say to us that they're not planning to send him to Syria. And so we gave them the okay to do that. And again, like every step of the way, you're anxious because
what's going to happen next?
What if they really do deport him?
Yeah.
And and so we sent off that letter, and when we eventually got word back from them, they basically said that they couldn't deport him to Syria because they didn't have a post to receive the Australian officers. And because Syria was at war, like it was just physically not possible to go there. They weren't going to risk their own officers sending him to a place where they didn't have any military officers to receive them and protect their officers while they were in a war torn country, while an active war was happening. And so in the letter they pretty much explained that they couldn't send him back because it just physically wasn't possible. And they had looked at sending him to Lebanon instead, but at the same time, the Lebanese government was overthrown. They didn't really have a government, and the little contact that they could get from the Lebanese department, they had no record of Ahmed even existing there. So they had no birth records. So they couldn't even prove that he was one of them. So they kind of said, he's not one of us. We don't have a record of him being Lebanese citizen either. So that eliminated Lebanon as an option to be deported to. And once we got that letter back from them and we knew that they weren't, deporting him and they weren't actively doing anything to do that because they physically couldn't, we just went full steam ahead. And she said, and then, we put the case in the federal court. We went for habeas corpus and compensation for wrongful detention. And COVID hit then at that point, and we had a pre-hearing with the federal court judge, and I think he had looked at all the evidence from both parties, and he said to the department, I'm giving you an opportunity now before the court case starts to see whether or not you would want to release him into the community and let him wait out the court case there. Because if he wins this case, and because we were going for a compensation claim at the same time, a damages claim as well, and the judge said if he wins this case, then there's more days that he's been detained for that you could potentially be paying damages for. And do you want to release him now to minimize that if that was the outcome? And they turned around and said no. So he was in detention the whole time. And so at the 4-year mark when we engaged with Alison, it probably took another almost 18 months to put the case together. So now we're at 5 years and 5.5 years that he's been sitting in detention. We haven't seen him. He's still not in Melbourne, like in a Melbourne detention centre. Then with COVID, there was, and at this point, I don't think I'd seen him for maybe close to 3 years, 4 years.
COVID would have made it even harder as well.
Yeah. And so, the day of the court came, again, Nick represented us, our barrister, and argued that the government was holding him unlawfully. And the government had their own solicitors and argued that, no, because he doesn't have a visa, they don't have to let him out. And the immigration law states that they don't even have to give us a date for when they're going to finalize processing him. It's basically indefinite. They could hold him indefinitely. And so after that, we had the hearing that went over a couple of days, and it was just a waiting game,
Another
waiting game of the judge making his decision. And like I said, it was during COVID where we were in lockdown at that point. And I think the longer the judge took, the more we thought, it's not going to go in our favor.
But there was research.
Worried about whether or not we would win that case. And
what was the outcome in the end?
Yeah, so it took about 6-7 weeks, and then the judge said, all right, I've come to a decision. I've set a court date to hand my decision down, and it was all done through video link because of COVID. So, I said Ahmad had to book in a room, at the detention centre, to be able to be on that video link. And, 10 a.m., we all jumped on, Alison, myself, Ahmad, all in different states. And a lot of commotion was happening at my place at that time. My friends were over. We were all hoping to see what would happen together. And I jumped on the video link. I saw the judge pop up on the screen. He was there for 10 seconds. Then he was gone and the screen went black. And I didn't hear a thing he said because the dogs were barking. And then, like I said, a lot of commotion was happening. And Ahmed's calling me saying, I can't get on. They've got a bad connection. What happened? Did we lose? I said, I don't know. I saw him, then 10 seconds later he was gone. And I thought, I'll wait for Alison to ring me and she'll tell me the verdict. I think I waited 15 minutes and I heard nothing from her, and I was freaking out, and I was like, that's it, I'm calling her. So I called her, and then she answered the phone stunned, she was almost speechless. And I said, Alison, what happened? And then I said, I explained that I missed the entire verdict. I didn't hear it. I said, what happened? I said, he was on the screen, the judge, then he was gone. And then she said, so you didn't see what happened? I said, no, what happened? And she goes, call Ahmad now and tell him to pack his bags and get the fuck out of there. And I was like, what? And then she said, we won. And I said, no way. What does that even mean? Because we're so used to hearing that every time we win, the decision gets bounced back to the minister to remake that decision. I said, what does that mean? She said, the judge granted him a writ of habeas corpus, which means release the prisoner immediately. It's Latin. That's pretty much what it translates to. And I said, so they've got to let him go now. And she said, yep, the judge has ordered his immediate release. And I said, no freaking way. I said, he's going. And I said, no. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe we won. Like, we won and the outcome was freedom. Every other time we've won, the outcome has been something else. It's not freedom.
That's so crazy. The emotions would have been wild.
Crazy. And the night before, because we knew that the decision was coming in the morning, Ahmed said to me, I'm packing my bags just in case. He goes, I'm packing my bags. If we win, I'm just going to grab my bags and I'm going. And he said, I'm packing my bags. And I said, do that. Like, yeah. And then Alison said to me, you ring Ahmed, let him know the outcome. I need to ring the department and have my day where I can tell all of them to release him now. And so,
Man,
yeah.
what a feeling that would have been.
Oh, it was amazing. So I called him and he was like almost in tears. He goes, we lost, didn't we? We lost. I know. I just thought we lost. And I said, actually, no, we didn't. I said, pack your bags, the bag that you've got under your bed. I go grab it. And Alison's words are, go straight to the front desk and tell them that if they hold you for a minute longer than they're allowed to, which they're not allowed to, that she'll be suing them further for holding you longer than they need to.
Can you imagine what he's going through at that point? Oh,
Can you believe me? At first, he kept on saying, you're lying to me, aren't you? You're lying. You're lying. I said, no. Like,
that's crazy.
I'm serious. Like, pack your bag. And he said, are you serious? And then when it finally hit him that I was serious, I could hear him telling everyone, like all the boys that he was locked up with, boys, I'm going home. I'm getting the fuck out of here now. Like, you know?
Shout out to the lawyer and the barrister. Incredible team.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Where does it sit now? So now him being out.
So,
now, where's the... Is he free? Is there still courts going on in the back?
So what happened like after that was, so he went to the front desk. They didn't believe that he was free because I think the centre, whenever there is a release, they get notification prior.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got the paperwork, discharge paperwork ready to release, a detainee when they are getting released. They had nothing for him. And of course, then they couldn't comprehend that a judge had released him because it's never happened. And a judge typically doesn't have a right to reinstate your visa. But in this case, we weren't getting his visa reinstated. He was getting released on a writ of habeas corpus. And it was the first habeas corpus case ever won.
You did tell me this, yeah. It was the first case. It was the first case in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Is it still open till now, this case, or is it kind of closed?
Well, so Alison sent through like all the facts through all the paperwork immediately and called them and said, release my guy now. Like, here's the court order. And they were really confused. They just didn't know how to deal with it. Eventually, they, made him wait outside and he said, I'm not waiting in the detention centre. And Alison said, he will wait for you to do the discharge papers, but he's waiting in the community. So he went out the front, in the driveway where they typically can't go. And I was on the phone to him at that time and he said to me, oh my goodness, this is the first time in years that I've seen a car like drive past. Like just those little things, like saw a car go by, because where he was being held at that time was in Perth, but it's regional Perth and they're on like quite a big block of land away from the main community. And he was just looking around, seeing things that he'd seen all his life, but I think after being locked up for so long, forgot that he had seen it.
What a story.
And because of COVID, they didn't have flights coming back to Melbourne that day. So they had to put him up in a hotel in Perth for 3 days, and then he flew to Melbourne. By the time he came back to Melbourne 3-4 days later, we already had notice from the government that they were appealing that case. And we sort of thought as much. And he was in a really weird position at the time because he was in the community on a writ of habeas corpus, but he had no visa. So it was a grey area, I think, for us and for the department, because you either are in the visa with you're either in the community with a visa or you're in detention because you have no visa.
Yeah.
So he was in the community with no visa and they couldn't re-detain him. So yeah, and so their options at the time were to give him a visa, even if it was temporary, and then they would be able to treat him like a normal civilian. So I remember when he was in the community at that point, like we got pulled over by the police one time, like a random, because it was New Year's Eve actually, and we were coming home. So they were just, doing a lot of just random road checks and stuff like that. And he had his driver's license. But then when they ran his name, he had no visa and they just didn't know what to do with him. So they called the department and the department said, you can't arrest him. Because the same rules didn't apply to him.
Yeah.
It was really strange. Like, it was a grey area. The same rules didn't apply to him, and so they didn't like him being in the community. But then they didn't issue a temporary visa, so the same rules could apply to him.
Yeah.
So he was just stuck in like that limbo. And this time when they appealed to the High Court, because you have to go to the next highest court up, and the High Court is the highest court of the land, and there's 7 judges or justices there, and you can either have a High Court hearing with 3 sitting judges or the whole bench of 7. We had the whole bench, and no matter what the outcome is in the High Court, the decision's final. There's no avenue of appeal after that. And so we had about 8-9 months in the community again before the High Court case was heard. We went down to Canberra for that, and we got there. We had our legal team, and we needed a QC to represent us at the High Court alongside our barristers.
Yeah.
We had 2 barristers, like Nick and Jim. They've been with us from day one. Then we had to get a QC, and the QC that we got, like, they usually charge about $50,000 a day.
Yeah.
But again, because it was
QCs are
such a
all
high-profile case, they did it pro bono. We were so lucky, like so blessed. And the QC that we had.
What was the name of the QC?
Do you remember what his name was? Steve.
Chris something.
No, Steve something. He is the ex-attorney. He's ex-attorney general's assistant at the time. Yeah.
So he's
I
really
actually
good.
forgot his name. Yeah. Really good. But Steve something. That was his first name. So he was the QC alongside our barristers and Alison. So that was our legal team: Alison, Nick, Jim, and the QC. And the Australian government had an entire team of barristers. Like,
they're ready to go.
Their side was just flooded, like, with barristers and lawyers and media and everything.
It's incredible how much money
goes into it.
Yeah, right there, they're throwing hundreds.
Yeah, insane. Yeah. And so, went there, battled it out again. It was a whole day in the High Court, and the decision was handed down pretty quick. It was about a month, and not only was the decision handed down quickly, the case itself was heard very quickly. Sometimes it can take up to 2 years to get a court date for the High Court, but in our scenario, the immigration minister, still Peter Dutton at the time, had asked the Attorney General to, like, fast track the case and get it heard immediately in the High Court. They didn't want anyone else being released under habeas corpus. They didn't want anyone else suing the government for the same. So in that 8 months, all the lawyers in that space knew that the government was appealing, and the precedent still stood until it was either overturned or we won the case in the High Court. So every lawyer was doing what they could to put a case forward and try to get their guys out under habeas corpus. And in the time, in that 8 months, that it took for us to go to the High Court, I think there was over 100 people that were released under the same precedent, because they were in similar situations like Ahmad. They couldn't be deported back home. They didn't have a case. They were facing indefinite detention. And
so you kind of opened a pathway.
The pathway, absolutely.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and a lot of people secured their freedom in that time. And what was happening was that before the cases were even being heard in court, like on the day of the court case or the day before of the court case, the government was just giving them visas and letting them out, because they just couldn't have another ruling. Because if it went to court, they would have to follow the precedent that had been set.
100%.
And the more cases that had followed that same precedent in writing, I think it would have just strengthened our habeas case. So the way that they saw it was they were just releasing everybody before their court cases. So at the time we went to the High Court, we still were the only ones that had the habeas ruling.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a month later, it was overturned. So we lost the court case in the High Court, and 7 judges, 4 ruled in the government's favour, 3 ruled in our favour, but because it was 4-3, we essentially lost. So that overturned the habeas ruling from the federal court. And then what we were faced with after that was, okay, so what does the government want to do with him now? Like, now that they won, they had 2 choices, or 3 really, and those choices were they could re-detain him, they could deport him, or they could finalize his visa status and just fix it up. And we won the court case. That's what we were after. Give him a visa and just let him continue on with his life. He'd been in the community at that point again for almost another year. No incidents, no nothing. So if you're really that much of a threat to the community, surely, in all these years, he would have accumulated other charges. He's never been charged for anything.
And what are they deciding now?
We're still in limbo.
Wow. Bloody hell.
Yeah, we're still in limbo.
We don't know where it was going. It's just courts, and not really courts now. Now it's just waiting for them to decide what they want to do.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the best outcome for you and Ahmed at this point? What do you feel like would you like to happen?
For them to give him a visa, reinstate his visa, because at the moment he's on a bridging visa E, which basically means it's a visa awaiting deportation. So he's been on this visa for the last 3 years. Yeah.
And people don't understand how frustrating that is, because every day you don't know what's going to happen.
Yes.
There's no answer. It's just like you're just waiting and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's tiring. That's tiring.
And, and after we lost that High Court case, like I said, they had an opportunity to do one of those 3 things. And what they chose to do was to re-detain him. And when Alison told us that, Ahmad just said, I can't go back to detention. I can't. He's been in and out, and, after winning that court case, thinking that he secured his freedom through habeas corpus, and to be told that you're going back to detention again, he said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And Alison had said to the department, can we arrange for him to just hand himself in rather than you storm their house in the middle of the night? And a date was set for him to hand himself back in, and he said, I can't do it. He said, I cannot physically, voluntarily walk back in. So he went on the run.
Freaking out. But so much emotions and feelings would be going on through there. Can you imagine the mindset, the grief and the pain in his mind and the trauma from the prison and all that? It's it's not easy. It's people don't understand.
I can't even explain it. What you're faced with every day, there's no certainty, there's no permanency, and he went on the run for a few months and before they eventually caught him anyway. And when they caught him and they took him back to detention, I think when he went in that time, that totally broke him.
Yeah.
That was the final, that was the time that I would say I saw the biggest change in him. And I saw his mental health completely decline.
Yeah.
It was bad. Don't get me wrong, it was bad the first 5.5 years, but that last year,
that would have been a different ball game.
Yeah.
A different ball game. I just want to double check. How long has that been running for, Clinton?
Hour and 44 minutes.
Okay. Let's roll it and let's get to where it's mind blowing. The suffering in that whole line.
Yeah. And when he went back in that time, he was there for, how long were you there? 14, 15? 18 months, yeah. And in that 18 months, we had nothing in the system. Like we had exhausted all our legal avenues. We weren't trying to put forward a case in the courts, nothing. We literally did nothing.
I just want to say, bro,
Yeah.
you're an incredible human being, and it's very sad what you've been through. And I say this from inside my heart because if you want to make a decision, make it.
Yeah.
Don't make someone suffer. Don't
Yeah.
imprison someone for such a long time. So
That's what they're good at, is making people suffer.
But it's so pointless. Like you kind of look back and you say, well, what's the point? Like, what are they trying to achieve? And not to mention the cost to detain someone and go through this whole process. And, and after this last stint in detention, when they released him, they just released him. Like they could have done this
long time ago.
A long time ago. But because we had challenged them, well, we feel because we challenged them, and really shook up, like the whole sort of immigration department from inside out. No one's ever won a habeas case. No one's ever taken them on and actually won at the level that we
That's
did.
a different ballgame. So now he's on a bridging visa.
Yes. So they released him. They called him one morning and said, you've got an appointment with ABF. And he was in Broadmeadows detention at this stage. And he went in there and they just said, you're going home today. And that's how easily it was done. You're going home. But when they released him on the bridging visa E, but that came with a whole bunch of conditions. And at the time, the conditions were a curfew, like a 10 p.m. curfew. You weren't allowed to go home. He had to live in a property one of their properties, in Coolaroo, and it was like a 2-bedroom unit, and another detainee lived there. Another detainee that was in the same boat as him was his roommate, and so
Constant reporting.
every week. That's right. Got to and also when he first got out, he had no work rights, no study rights, and so you're serving detention, but in the community. It's effectively community detention. And
how is he now? How is life now for him?
Same. Like where
No
the
rights.
only difference today from 3 years ago when he was released is that he doesn't have the curfew and he's allowed to live at home. And he's got working rights. But other than that, all the other conditions are exactly the same.
And how are you feeling with all this? Obviously, you would have, at this point of your life.
Yeah, it's...
You must be tired of it, huh?
Yeah, as bad as it sounds, there's a part of me that's just become desensitized to it all. And to the point that when we hear of someone who's taken their life in detention, mind you, that happens all the time. Detainees can't handle it. They don't know if they're ever getting out, and so many people have taken their lives. And when Ahmad was locked up, so many people took their lives all the time. It's to we've been desensitized to the point where when we hear that now, we're like, oh yeah, another one. Oh yeah.
Very sad. Very sad. What's a message from you, Danice, to a lot of these people that are out there? Whether it's the partner suffering in silence while their husband's taken away from her and locked up in these detention centers. What's a message to you to them?
Look, to be honest, if Ahmad had the option to be deported and go back, to Lebanon, even if it was Lebanon at the time, we would have taken it. We were prepared to go back. And in hindsight, it may seem like a bad option, being deported and being stripped away from the country, but you can always restart your life in another country.
Yeah.
It might be hard the first 6 to 12 months, but you can always restart your life. And that's always going to be a better option than sitting in limbo in a detention center for however many years.
Not knowing the
you don't
outcome.
know. Yeah.
You're an
It's-
incredible human being. Very powerful.
You know,
Great
like,
patience.
yeah, well,
You know?
after he was released, there were some other detainees that challenged the government in their own cases, and in a recent ruling, which came through last November or October, the High Court actually finally recognised that indefinite detention is unlawful. So they finally ruled that the government can no longer hold detainees indefinitely without cause. That triggered over 300 people being released from detention. And when that happened, um, the government kind of had a knee-jerk reaction and said, how are we going to monitor all these people? And they decided that they're going to put an ankle monitor on everybody. And then that applied to everybody. So that, a year after Ahmed had been released, he got called in and said, you now have to wear an ankle monitor. And that got challenged again. The High Court found again that it was unlawful to track everybody. So a year later, the ankle monitor came off. And, again, they've been fighting with how are we going to manage these people. So very recently, I think just a few months ago, the department signed a deal with Nauru that Nauru will now take these people that Australia can no longer detain. It was a $407 million deal that they signed and $70 million per year ongoing. And this has now put us in a position of, okay, now our real threat is that he could possibly be one of those people that gets deported to Nauru. They've sent so far, I think, 5 people there. He falls under that that umbrella. Like,
and that's where he
maybe
sits now.
that's where he sits now.
And every single day, question is, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, well, and I think we had a brush with that because we had a phone call from the department literally 3 days after this deal was signed, and they called Ahmed. They said, Ahmed, we want to come and do a welfare check, and he said, I haven't seen you guys for a year. Why do you want to do a welfare check now? And they said, no, Ahmed, it's just a welfare check and so on and so on. And at first he said, I'm not seeing you. And then they said, we need to see you. They said, I'll see you. And he said, I'll see you in a park. I'll see you somewhere public. You're not coming to my house. And they said, no, we need to come and see you. And he called me and he said, what if they want to take me back? That every time he hears from them, he thinks that
you're going to lock him up and take him away.
Yeah. And I said to him, let him come. That we've got no choice. Let him come. This was maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago? Yeah. And I spoke to Alison and I told her, and she said, let them come. If anything happens, ring me. And they came. There was 5 of them, all suited up, bulletproof vests, like SWAT uniform, and there was 5 of them that came in. They had their body cams on, and they came in. We sat at the dining table. They did an interview. It was just a welfare check in that instance, but it made us so paranoid.
Yeah.
That, like, what's next?
What a journey! What an incredible journey! And salute to you and hats off to you and Ahmed for being patient and just being patient and understanding. Like words can't describe, the feeling and the emotions through this whole period of time. It's fantastic. And like I said, I was saying to Ahmed, salute to you for keeping a bit of your mind together, not going insane and losing your brain.
I don't know. I sit up a lot, and I do think to myself, like, how is he still whole? Like, I don't know. I could never imagine.
People can be suicide. They just say, I can't do this anymore, and just off they go.
Yeah.
But you guys are still here.
It's not finalized. Like, I don't know how he does it. And and when he first got released, I did see like so many signs of the effects of detention.
Oh, 100%.
The effects of all of, like, the ongoing PTSD. Like, it's just there. Like, he would someone would walk through the front door, and have their keys in their hands, and he would jump and he would have to see who it is. And
extreme paranoia.
Yeah, and I said to him, well, what is it? Like, what is it? Like, do you just need to see? Like, whereas I would just sit there and wait till they walk through down the hallway into our living room to see who it was. Like, and he said, when we were in detention, if you hear at 2 a.m., you hear keys jangling down the hallway and boots, someone's being moved. They're coming to grab you and someone's being moved. So he just, every time, like, he would hear the keys, like, that would trigger that, It's just like those little things you can't really measure. And
They stay. They become a memory. And that's something that now is locked in with him for life,
Yeah.
And it's I'm just speechless at the story. And like I said, I'm very grateful to be able to sit here and listen to it, what you experienced and what you went through and what you're still going through. It's an absolute honor to actually have you here and talk about your partner's story and the process that he's gone through.
Yeah.
But it's inspiring. It's actually very, very inspiring, and I really appreciate you being able to come on and share this with me.
Yeah, no, thank you.
It's been, I'm speechless. Like it's just raw.